old Outbound is dying. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why Unify even came into being. Unify does warm outbound rather than like you spray and pray. And warm outbound gives you signals.
GTM is now been in the strangest place it's ever been, especially for B2B companies. There are tools, there are workflows, but nobody is responding to emails.
One of the mistakes that founders do is bring RevOps too late. And if you're bringing RevOps too late, all you're doing is you're asking them to fix things that should have already been architected. I believe that RevOps is in the best position to lead AI transformation in a company. I've been doing this for like 10 years. Less humans touch it, the less humans break it. So it's one of the toughest jobs in a startup to build go-to-market in a fast-moving startup. So you are changing parts of a car while it's moving very fast. Everybody has features with AI. Like even saying like we are AI native is not really a factor that actually matters anymore. You're sitting on money that is just going and producing nothing.
Welcome to Edbound with Kinar Hassan. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today. How are things at Unify GTM right now?
Great. We are rapidly scaling. It's always good to be that like startup phase of that hyper growth. There's a lot of like energy around, and I think like AI is exploding everywhere. So I think this is the time to be.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable times. I mean, every day you turn to office and something's been automated, something, you don't need a few more humans. So unbelievable times. But I am curious about what you're building, and especially to begin with about you, right? How do you introduce yourself to, let's say, a group of investors or fellow entrepreneurs when you're in a room with them?
Yeah. You mean as Unify?
No, I mean, like as Hassan, how do you introduce yourself?
So, for people who don't know, I am Hassan and I've worked in revenue operations. Prior to it was called revenue operations. So I started working at sales ops. I've like about a decade of experience working there in startups and hypergrowth startups. And this was a time when like RevOps didn't have a label, but people were doing a lot of that work. So sales ops at a younger organization didn't really have like anybody in like growth marketing, didn't really have anybody in like customer support. You just ended up just what people would say like, oh, I wear different hats on different days.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my start into that. And from there onwards, like once revenue operations was a coined term, I was like, perfect. I was already doing this. Since then, I worked in like almost like 5 different organizations of different sizes, PE backed, VC backed, Series A startups, IPO companies. And I've also done like a lot of like consulting with different business models. So I've seen it all and done it all, which allows me to basically, lead the charge now in RevOps at an AI company, because I've seen a lot of the foundations. And now I'm seeing all of this like, new world that is coming through. And we talked about, like you touched upon the automation piece. I'm like, yeah, that was what I was doing. And now I'm just doing it at like a 4x like pace.
Wow. All right, Hassan. So RevOps is sort of a new domain. It's a new beast that almost all founders are trying to tackle now. What's your take on it? I mean, how essential it is to have like a RevOps machine, and at what stage do you come in? Like what stage would we say that it becomes an essential?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would say it's if you have a product that you're taking to market and you have a sales team, I think it's like right time to bring in RevOps, because one of the mistakes that founders do is bring RevOps too late. And if you're bringing RevOps too late, all you're doing is you're asking them to fix things that should have already been like architected. So example would be like you are a series A to B motion of a company and you're realizing, oh, I can't scale this. Things are breaking, cracks are showing up. And that's when you're like, okay, let's bring in RevOps. Like, but what you actually do in that scenario is like you put RevOps at like firefighting and you're saying like, there's all these cracks. Can you make sure you patch up all the cracks before you actually become strategic, right? So you're already setting them up for like more of a firefighter mode rather than being strategic. My point of view on this is like bring RevOps early, have them design and architect a system that builds for scale so you don't end up like wasting time fixing cracks, and use them as a strategic like lever versus like competitors. Like you have somebody who sits in the middle of your go-to-market, connects the dots between sales, marketing, CX, especially at an early stage company. And I've seen like IPO companies that I've worked with, I've PE backed, like it's always different, but you will see at an early stage startup, you also are battling another problem is as you're growing fast, things are moving away from each other rather than converging. So departments have their own KPIs, they have their own processes. If they're doing this all in silo, this silo is just gonna extrapolate here and
Yeah.
expand. What do you do with RevOps is like you want to make sure that they're all gelled together and you scale together in the same direction that the company wants to go in. And if you want to change that direction, there is no best like department outside of RevOps to actually help you do that change. So yeah,
I
it's
mean,
never too late.
yeah. So if we right really wanted to dumb down RevOps for someone, what are the core KPIs of the first RevOps hire that a founder would look at?
Yeah, so the domain is very large right here because you're like, hey, all these problems are there. Can you come and solve them? A good RevOps, and having done this like multiple times successfully at
Yeah.
multiple orgs that I've scaled like from A to B to C, I would say a good RevOps has to come in and start taking the process in their own hands and dictate where you want to go. If there are 1,000 things, a good RevOps, strategic RevOps tells them out of those 1,000 things what the top 10 hitting things are that will make an impact today. Right. So you have to be like that partner versus like the founders bring you in and they dictate like and tell you like, hey, I need this. That's a
Yeah.
very different motion. So I would say like a good RevOps comes in, assesses where the scale and maturity level of a company is, then draft up a plan, have the buy-in from, the founders and all the stakeholders that are there, and then execute on that. And I've done this, like I have a clear like 30, 60, 90-day plan that I've implemented a couple of times that works
Wow,
for it.
that would be super helpful to hear about, like a hypothetical 30-day plan, because I think almost everybody knows a lot of these things, but when we come to execute, I think a lot of pieces are broken. And especially with AI, I think the cloud is all over GTM and operations. So let's hear about a good 30-day plan for somebody
Yeah.
hiring a RevOps for the first time.
Yeah.
And take a hypothetical company, because I've spoken to a lot of our listeners, and at times what kind of really resonates well is a practical example. So you name a hypothetical product. I mean, let's just say it's a fintech, SaaS, or I don't know. You pick one example and let's see what the first 30 days for a RevOps would look like.
Yeah. So let's take that like fintech example, or even like a company like Unify, that you have a B2B SaaS platform.
Yep.
You join the company, the first thing you want to do is like, and a lot of times RevOps makes this mistake, is you don't understand the product itself. Like for any organization coming in with like ideas that you want to have like for change, you need to understand how the pieces move. Right. So first thing I did, for example, at Unify was like I sat with a salesperson. I was like, can you give me a demo? Right. And I asked as a buyer, like all the questions that were in my head. So what that allowed me to do is like not only give feedback to the salesperson how the buying and selling was happening, but for me to actually just understand any pain points me as a buyer would have, any suggestions that I'm giving to the seller, but also for me to just like understand how the product works. So I hit like all these three in like one demo that I sat in. So the first 30 days, my plan is usually like to soak everything in, right? Talk to all the stakeholders. So I'll have like meetings scheduled with like every single stakeholder of like head of CX, head of growth marketing, and just understand what maturity level is that sub org in. What are your pain points right now? Because like I said, like there's about 1,000 things that you can pick up and fix at a startup.
Yeah.
You want to take the ones that move the needle the most for the company.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
working with the leadership directly from there, you also understand what the overarching goal of a company is. So when things are going away from each other, when you're doing this 30-day discovery phase, you're able to see the cracks and you make the list and you're like, okay, now I know what the biggest challenges are for each and like each stakeholder here. And then how do I connect these all? Right. So that's where like the first 30 days is mostly soaking it all in. I create something I call like lay of land, and I create a document around, just document all the pain points that I found there, and then ranking them in like top three. Like, hey, I think these are the three problems for sales. These are the three problems for CX. And then what you're doing is strategically narrowing down the scope. And that allows you to set up like really good foundations for the 30 to 60 days and then like 60 to 90.
Yeah, yeah. No, makes total sense. Where does, let's say, I am a big fan of OKRs, right? I think OKRs are a superpower. Let's say if RevOps had to own an OKR and the company has maybe one of the major goals that it has to hit, go from, let's say, $4 or $5 million of revenue to about 20 million, right? I mean, would you be able to say that you own that? Because usually in the old world, growth would come and say that, I own that, especially for a PLG motion, because it's not even, I mean, sales kind of falls under the growth, if I'm thinking it correct, in the modern AI driven company. How would RevOps fit into that OKR? Would you assist growth? Would you lead sales?
Yeah. So part of this would be like, it depends on how your like departments are structured. And this is again, like a lot of founders and companies get this wrong, is they usually position like your RevOps engine under like a sales or marketing.
Yeah,
And
that's why I asked the question. I know
yeah,
that that's what happens.
which sets them up actually completely misaligned in my view, right? Because what's happening is like in a modern world, a good modern RevOps is supposed to be more department agnostic, because that's how you help the company. Like if you're like, hey, I report into sales, I work with sales, and my goal is to improve what the sales department is doing, you will a lot of times ignore stuff that's happening on the marketing sides because your incentives are not aligned. And then you have to kind of like make sure these three departments are, in line working with each other. But how are you supposed to do that if like it's a basic conflict of interest that I only report to like one department and I want to make sure that department hits their OKRs, right? Nobody else. Like, because for me, that's the impactful thing. So going back to how like you set up like compensation structures for sales, if they're misaligned, if you don't give them the wrong direction, they will go through that direction because that's how you're incentivizing. So in my world, I would say RevOps has to sit a little bit neutral from these and then help the OKRs. Like the goal that revenue operations should own is mainly should be towards revenue, right? That's the one big number and goal that like nobody and everybody owns towards that. But that's how you create alignment. If everyone's like gearing towards the one big goal of like hitting that revenue number, and that doesn't like stop you from like creating all these initiatives from AI that will impact. Every time you will have to think about like, oh, is this initiative moving the needle on revenue or not?
So let's hear about initiatives at a hypothetical company, or maybe at Unify GTM, because this would be a good example to go deeper into the RevOps action plan.
Yeah. So a lot of like initiatives that like, again, like once I do my like discovery phase, you start focusing into like where are you gonna put like alignment with the teams and controls in place. Like, I mean, nowadays I would say like the world of AI is moving so fast that what I was like impactfully doing, I can do like 4 times that, like what I was doing like 10 years ago in terms of automation. One of the areas that like, for example, like I was like tinkering around with like Claude, building out basically an entire like lost analysis of our deals. So, and what it would do is like, it would take the deals from this quarter, compare the deals from previous quarter and create an analysis to say like, oh, are we losing more versus the last quarter on product features? Are we losing more on pricing? And then summarize that, put it nicely into a format, send it in Slack on like end of quarter, everybody to read, or create a Notion page out of that. So now you like, all of this was like a very mundane kind of work that you'd have to do, pull, clean.
Yeah.
If you have the foundations right in the data, now you can apply the AI on top and it actually does a very good job.
No, I think I resonate with that quite a bit. But, I realize that it's not just data, it's also habits with the sales and marketing team. A lot of times, I mean, it's getting easier with AI because now you can have a co-pilot or an assistant or maybe a Cluely agent that's constantly listening and is logging all this data so that you can run the MCP engine on Claude and build a dashboard. But I hear you. I think we're entering a very interesting era where it's almost like what we just spoke about, what you just mentioned is a workflow engine, right? I mean, it's all plug in your CRM MCP, plug in your call record MCP. And I see a lot of large organizations moving in that direction. This morning I was blown away by the evolution of Apollo.io. Like, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at Apollo recently. I mean, it's just gone from being a data provider to trying to become an operating system for GTM, from cold email, inbound signals, orchestration, call recording, everything.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like that's where you will see a lot of tools go towards is convergence of this. I mean, we say this at Unify as well. Like, so Unify started as a very different product for just like intent signals that would work for like marketing teams, and now we have personas that we are selling into that are sales BDR teams, and like people who would be like, oh well, I don't like to use these old legacy tools of like outreach. I'm using all of these, but like I would like the new suite of like tech that is coming through.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and yeah, AI has just like supercharged this because it's so easy to now work on new product features and ship them out fast. So you'll see this convergence happening like across, like
Yeah.
Gong, for example, does like
Yeah.
5 of the
Yeah.
things that Gong never used to do before.
Yes. And one of the thoughts that I had when I looked at Apollo and when you use something like a Claude is you start thinking, I mean, why are they doing this? Because I could do all of this with a few agents set up on multiple platforms, right? And it does sort of make sense, but it also does not make sense. So I think that's where the whole bit about being, a funny, interesting time in the world right now is. So what do you think? I mean, this is great about RevOps. Now, I think if you look at it, GTM is now been in the strangest place it's ever been, especially for B2B companies because of all this, right? I mean, there are tools, there are workflows. You could do outbound, but nobody is responding to emails. I mean, the open rates are cranking. You have to have a multi-prong, multi-touch point, multi-surface kind of a reach out. So how would you start putting a bit of sanity into it if you joined at a company that's trying to get to a Series A? What's your take going to be to set up strong fundamentals that would scale till their Series B or C?
Yeah, I think like some of the things, and this is where I believe, and I was having this conversation yesterday with a bunch of RevOps leaders in why I like fundamentally believe that RevOps is in the best position to lead that like AI transformation in a company. Because if you think about it, good models that you apply on any problem require context, right? And the best context usually has the better outcome. RevOps sits in the middle, having all the context of a go-to-market team, because we're working like you're sitting in those like meetings for each and every department and hearing their problems. You have the context on why things are happening, rather than like I'm an engineering team from the side. I've never talked to a sales team, but I'm designing something for a sales team. This is where internally we like, and I'm always like every day I'm like just blown away by how much Unify as a tool can do. And this is where like the problem of what you mentioned, like cold outbound is dying. And that's one of the reasons why Unify even came into like being. Unify does like warm outbound rather than like you spray and pray. And warm outbound gives you signals. So, and the classic example I give is like, think of you walking down the street and somebody, with a banner trying to sell you something, right? You're instantly, it's a cold outbound to you. You're like instantly like zone out and you just walk past through and you're like, no, thank you. Now you moved and you went into a shop, right? And somebody comes and tries to sell you something. You have already shown some level of intent there that like, hey, maybe I'd be interested in anything in this shop. And now,
maybe I'm holding a phone and this guy sells luxury phone covers, I mean,
exactly. So now you're in there. You've already taken some kind of action. Now you're the, like, in my view, I've narrowed down from like all buyers to the right buyer, right? And now you've already entered the shop. So it might be the right time, right? And I'm narrowing down and now I have to land the right message to you. So this is where I think like the world is moving towards, is like the conversion rates might be way higher if I sell you the phone, if you had the phone and you were looking for a cover, versus like if I'm just out there selling, hey, do you want a cover? So I think like that's the change that we're seeing. And RevOps sitting in the middle, having all the context, helps you design a lot of that foundation like that this is built on. To your point, like salespeople and marketing folks, like if you leave it to the devices, you might end up with like a very bad data set that a lot of companies are usually like battling. And especially if you're an IPO company, you've done this for 10 years of like bad data, or 12 years of bad data that you're sitting on, and you're trying to apply AI to it. And you're like, oh, well, this doesn't work because it doesn't have the context. It doesn't have the right data. So in this, like generally second phase, when I have like something I call like controls. you put the controls. And in my world is like the less humans, and I've been doing this for like 10 years before AI, is like the less humans touch it, the less humans break it. So
Wow.
you
Yeah, that's so
automate.
true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, automate the capture, automate functions, everything. I mean, Claude's also been giving me signals, and I see this now. I was just talking to my team today that maybe we can make the CRM invisible. Somebody just comes in the morning and says, Claude, who should I connect with? And Claude
Yeah.
gives you the number, says, this guy is up for a touch point. You didn't talk to this guy for 3 days. This is the list. And whatever you do, you just tell Claude, it goes and makes the entry in the CRM, captures the context, connects with the meeting note taker. I think, yeah, it's unifying. I kind of agree with you. I think one of the key things here, and I want to go deeper into it. I think case studies really help people a lot. So let's just pick up something like a commoditized service domain. So let's just say there's a IT services company,
Mhm.
and they sell IT services to like app development to mid-market or large enterprises. There are a lot of those in let's say Middle East, India, a lot of other parts. How would they deploy in your ideal suggestion framework? What should be they doing to kind of start the motion? And let's say everything so far before they come to you has been done with relationships and events, but now they want to scale, crack a new geography, maybe crack the US. So let's lay it down step by step.
Yeah, so I would like, if I were them, start with, and having run like more like a consultancy motion in the past myself, it's mainly what you're looking for, like drill down from first principles and like think about like what problem you're trying to solve. If I was a company that, let's say, sells security, like as a process, like, hey, like we can IT security, like we help you tighten all your security protocols.
Yeah,
What
good
is the,
example.
yeah, and what is the signal that you will actually take, that I'd be like, again, going
Hmm.
back to like the concept of like going into the shop looking for what you're buying.
Hmm.
Maybe there's one area someone's actually looking for an ID software that helps like tighten the security. That's one signal. That's what you
Yeah.
call like almost like a first party signal, that someone's actually
Yeah.
with the clearest intention that I'm doing this, right? The other one could be if you're looking into security breaches that are happening, security incident breaches.
Hmm.
And we built this like at Unify an agent for one of our customers as well, where like every time that there's a security breach that is like published, and more like they are on
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the platforms, and then immediately you can find the right people that are in your list and like reach out to them to say like, oh, heard like
Hmm.
there's a security breach at XYZ, you might be using this technology, um and then offer your services and show them the use cases to say like, we have helped like a couple of companies like that, that resonates.
Hmm.
It's the right time, because like I'm like
Yeah. Yeah.
already afraid, like, yes, there's a breach, I'm
I
using this.
mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, the signal and the intent is quite loud, right? So I
Yeah.
agree with you.
So I would say like, yeah, for companies that are like even selling services, we have like customer base that is selling services that use Unify for their advantage. Those are the companies again like that will win in the future, because they're doing something that has a higher conversion rate versus like, again, me going out and selling my services as a cold outbound. The chances of conversion, because I'm a numbers person and RevOps, I'm like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's the highest converting channel, and use that and double down, which partnerships, for example, is also one of those.
Yeah.
um, but you have to create another channel like out of that.
Yeah. No, I think super valid point about signals. And, this is a brilliant example that you just took, security breach. I think platforms like Clay, where you could enrich a lot of this data. I mean, you could have listening signals. And I think there are other platforms like Trigify. I don't know if you've come across Trigify.
Yep.
I had Max on the founder on the pod as well. So I think you could build like a good system that's constantly listening and hit out people at the time. What would be the next step? I mean, your cold outbound playbook, it's still cold, right? Because you just read a signal and now you're reaching out to the guy. I have spoken to so many founders, and everybody's really not happy about the fact that if they read 100 signals, only possibly about 5 people open the email.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
real pain. What do you suggest can be done at that stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, and I would still bifurcate versus like, I would still say like it's kind of cold, but like the stronger the signal, the
Yeah.
warmer your
I
outbound is.
agree. Way better than okay, maybe I change the number. Instead of 5 you get 15. I can bet you'll it's super tough to pass 15,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Yes.
it's not easy.
Yeah, it's like I mean, selling is never easy, but I would say what you can do here is do a couple of things, right?
Mhm.
In terms of go to market strategy, you can refine your messaging to resonate with people, have like a little bit of more use cases that actually create a little bit more confidence in what you're selling. So, for example, like for Unify, we have customers with case studies like Perplexity, right? So, if we are saying, if you're talking to another AI company, and I'm or LLM company, and I'm saying like, hey, look at Perplexity and how they created like a couple of million of dollars in without actually having a BDR or an SDR working on it. That resonates more than I say like, hey, I have like these three companies that I work with. People are like,
Hmm.
I don't know what industry they're in. It
Yeah,
may not
yeah,
work for me. What's working for you? And to your point, it's still hard to get them to engage and respond, right?
yeah.
But that doesn't mean like you can still like do multi-channel approach. Like emails, my emails get bombarded. I get like 10 to 12 like cold phone calls like every day as
Phone calls.
like
Wow.
people are still dialing. Like I mean, you have power dialers now, you have
Yeah.
localization, a lot has like moved there. And RevOps is a hard persona to sell into because we don't pick up calls, but it still works. Calling is still a channel that is producing, revenue. It still brings in pipeline. So what you want to do as a business is like make sure you're like turning every stone and you have all these multi-threading channels like LinkedIn,
Hmm.
emails, calling, rather than just like sending an email waiting for that.
Yeah.
You increase your chances of success and conversion if you
Hmm.
actually open up like your domain and say like I want to approach maybe not only one person, I want to approach like 10 people at this company in three different channels. Now conversion rate is like there's much higher chance that somebody will
Yeah.
respond, or even like we get like we bombard them like for example with like an outbound motion and say like yes we want to call even if they're not buying right now. They may have like I see the emails. I don't respond to them, but I see the
Hmm.
email. That is an impression, right? I still
Hmm.
saw your brand. If I have seen your brand and what they say is like more than 7 times, like kind of like in your head, and I know the brand
Yeah.
now, it's the brand awareness piece that you've done.
Yeah.
And we have so many that we outbound to, they come inbound after like maybe a month or two because they already know, maybe they're following your LinkedIn page now, which is an intent,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they see something, and now when the right time comes, they reach out.
Yeah, I think fantastic. No, I agree with that. I think that works. In fact, I see people trying paid ads as another channel, Google follow-ons. So I think yes, these are all best practices. And if I had to, one of the big problems also is that I don't know if it falls under RevOps
Mhm.
responsibility. In some companies I have heard it does, to choose the tools, to choose the workflows and the orchestrations. I think it's so tough, never been tougher, because you have so many options to choose from. How do you bring sanity there? Because what Apollo is offering, part
Yeah.
of that Clay is offering, right? And I mean, there are so many other platforms that you could stitch to
Yeah.
build exactly the same thing.
Yeah. The lines are gray like these days. Like you don't know where which tool stops and the other tool starts. And everywhere I've worked, I've owned the tech stack and the strategy behind it.
Hmm.
The first thing I do is generally like audit the tech stack and see stack up the capabilities against each other. Super easy to do these days. Like, I mean, with using AI and kind of like stacking that up fairly fast. And then stacking up adoption of that. A lot of times I feel like this is where I've like worked closely with the leaders to just spin up and gain trust is showing them, running an audit and showing them, hey, out of these 10 tools, three of these here have adoption of maybe like 10 to 20%. Like you're sitting on like money that is just going and producing nothing, right?
Give me an example of that. I would love to hear
Oh
one
yeah,
example of.
100%. Like I would say at a company I worked at called like FEV Tutor, I joined and I found out that we had a customer success platform that the last login from a person was about like 3 weeks ago. I'm like, okay,
Wow, I
like
get it.
then I dive deeper into that, right? I was like, okay, what is the reason here? Turns out the feature built there was never like fully launched properly. Adoption was low. And the requirements of like a customer success platform, generally a lot of those things you can build in like Salesforce. So that itself was a 40K spend that I was immediately just looking at. I was like, underutilized. It's not only just like cutting the tool and saving the dollar, it's getting the
Yeah.
ROI out of that dollar. Right. So it's like, how do you make sure that like that $1 spend of that is actually bringing you more than $1 back? And that's the strategy part where you start stitching it together. So I
Yeah.
stacked up this across like 10 tools, and I was able to save 100K out of that, which immediately wins your trust to the CEO
Yeah.
and founders
Yeah.
that you're working with, and saying like, this 100K is very well spent in other projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like, again, starting from like the first principles, thinking about like, why did we even buy these tools, and then see where the consolidation happens. And consolidation, not because of like, RevOps shouldn't come from the point of view where finance would come saying like, hey, you don't need these tools, like these other tools also do that. RevOps should have the lens of saying like, not everybody does all of those things well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Classic example would be like, would you go to pizza place that is known for its pizza because they started like burgers, and you're like, oh, this is where I go for burgers. Like, you don't go to McDonald's for pizza if they tomorrow say like, we also make pizza.
Yeah.
It's like, how well can you execute that? Having a feature is like not a factor anymore, because everybody has those features. Like with AI, like even saying like we are AI native is not really a factor that actually matters anymore, because everybody does. So you
Yeah.
have
No, I think
yeah.
I think that's so well said. And this is a brilliant example. So if you really think about it, I think you get a seat at the leadership table because you're not just doing reports, you're translating ops into revenue impact, and this is such a great example of what you just mentioned. I mean, you've been able to do something like that. So
Yeah,
makes total sense.
I was gonna say I would double down on that as well, because this is something like a lot of like the RevOps needs to learn as well, because we like, and I've been at that fault as well, because I've seen it, I've learned it the hard way,
Yeah.
is we fall into that like trap of like going down in the details and like having those conversations with the leadership, and that makes you tactical, that makes you not strategic, because you're like down in the
Yeah.
details talking about that. When you start getting into the impact, and this is what we do, like for example at Unify, like I would not only make a dashboard, I would make a dashboard, bring all the data, standardize, I trust the data, and then produce an analysis out of that and bring it to leadership to say like, hey, we just realized like this XYZ is working into a totally different direction, which is away from our overall goals. This is the impact, and this is the suggestion from it. Now you're winning the confidence of the leadership to say like, we don't have to wait for the problem to become the problem in the company. You're bringing us analysis of like, I just understood
Yeah.
where the trend is going. This is what I've seen before. This is a recommendation. I think we should like, steer the ship in this direction now. And that's
Yeah.
like the ship, just like, I will pick the option
No.
1, 2, and we'll take the direction.
No, I think I have often seen this. A lot of leaders love dashboards, but very, very few are able to change behaviors.
Yes.
So I think the pattern that you build, are you able to drive down an impact and a behavior change through that? So I think, yeah, this is fantastic. I love the way you kind of, are building the narrative around why RevOps becomes one of the most important functions and a powerful system within the organization. So 2 KPIs that really stand out for me right now, which I see GTM not able to evaluate really well. Like GTM leaders don't kind of really think in terms of, let's say analysis from dashboards as well as tool decisions. They think tools are the strategy, but it's not the tool that's the strategy. It's actually, what does the tool bring on the table? The patterns the tool is able to automate, or decisions that the tool is able to help you mitigate. You don't have to take that over and over again. So I do see that like as a huge pillar in an early stage company. I feel founders are sort of the RevOps marketing, and I mean, founders are like that crazy breed. We kind of think we can do everything, and then we do shitty stuff all over. So no, this is fantastic. Now coming to a few very important questions. In your experience, the biggest mistake most of the companies that you joined, the teams were making. So let's just pick one. that you could choose and say, okay, this is the worst one that I've seen people making over and over?
Yeah, I would say, and I'll start with maybe like hitting on the point like you mentioned very well is for the tools, like it's a means to an end, right? So it's like
Yeah.
tools is not your strategy. AI is not your strategy. AI is a
Yeah.
tool that you use to impact. So what I think like the biggest mistake that I feel like founders make, as well as like a lot of like RevOps team fall into this trap, is firefighting mode. Like you end up becoming like ticket takers. Someone's like, hey, this is broken, this is happening. What that pulls you away from is being that strategic partner to leadership and the business. And that sometimes have to come from the top, right? It has to, the leadership has to set the tone there. And RevOps has to be like the champion within to say like, hey, this is like where we would like to focus on. So for example, everywhere I've tried to design a RevOps org, I keep somewhere around 20 to 30% of that firefighting mode because it's still a necessary thing, right? It's fires are at an early stage startup, fires are going
Yeah.
to spin up. But how do you make yourself strategic there is after you do the like 30, 60, the 60 to 90-day plan is where I start putting groundwork of a roadmap. So if you actually start thinking about revenue operations as a product team, right? You have a roadmap that product team generally keeps, for that time frame and don't deviate too much out of it. You can still have like 10-20% things, new projects that will come in, but you want to make sure like you did the assessment, you have these like high hitting projects across the board for each and every department that are on the roadmap. And now you make that public, people understand that. That immediately just takes you away from like, hey, I have an idea, why don't we build this? Like that pulls you away from actual core work. Like now I'm having like 3 different meetings a week on a project that was never discussed and we don't know the impact of it. That happens in an early stage startup a lot. And this I've learned from experience. So I tone down there and I make sure like, hey guys, like this is not the most impactful thing right now for the business, knowing our goals for the next quarter. These things are already there. They are all on the roadmap. They will, and roadmap is built with the teams, not in silo, right? So you're making sure like, hey, all your needs for the next quarter and this quarter are on the roadmap that we've already discussed, and then making sure, and again, I've learned this the hard way from my consulting experience as well, the scope is set, right? You can't just keep on changing the scope every other month. That's the whole point of having a roadmap. So that's one mistake that I think like a lot of leaders would like issue the roadmap with you and then like change it all in a month. Yeah, that takes you away from building that momentum of like change that you have to bring into the org. Yeah, stops you from like delivering at speed, because now you're like focusing on like all these other projects that were not there. Maybe you're getting like bombarded with slacks from the sales team all the time for like Salesforce validation errors and all these other things that could pull you. So have a bucket for that, but like have a bucket, majority of the bucket for all these other strategic projects that you have to execute working with the teams, and execution takes time. So just making sure like RevOps is able to work on all of these layers rather than like people get stuck in the bottom layer a lot.
Wow, I mean, that's brilliantly put. I think you've hit so many nerves for someone who's building. I think so many nerves there. I think my final question to you is, and this is a curiosity, if somebody is looking for hiring Hassan for their organization, right? Somebody like you, give me where to look for someone like you. What should be the indicator or the profile that I should look for?
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, nowadays there's a lot of different areas because RevOps is like growing, and I think I was reading that it was one of like the third or fourth like fastest growing jobs in the US. So there's a lot of new leaders that are stepping in. I've also worked with like partners on these, where like there's a company called Whispered that does a lot of like unposted roles. So you can actually like, have a community of like go-to-market operators.
Whispered.
Yes.
How do you spell that?
Just like whispering, like that's.
Like whisper. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And it's a portal. It's a job portal sort of a thing, is it?
Yeah. It's built by one of my close friends, like Andy, who has basically worked, a lot in this industry and has like kind of like felt the pain there to say, how do you find that top talent, and how do you find
Yeah.
them before somebody else is actually finding them, right? So there's some of these unposted roles that don't go, and then you find these leaders that are silently looking and you match them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say what you're looking for in those like early stages as founder to hire for RevOps is somebody who has a little bit of more like experience in like building from that stage. Because I kind of joke about it, but also like serious partly is like I feel like it's one of the toughest jobs in a startup to build go to market in a fast moving startup. So the analogy I give is like you are changing, parts of a car while it's moving very fast.
Yeah, I think, yeah, brilliant. That's a great one. Yeah,
And that is a challenging thing to do, right? So because
absolutely.
you're not only building stuff, by the time you build, stuff has changed. So you have to
Yeah.
adapt. I would say look for someone who can actually build something that is
Mm.
flexible enough to accommodate a couple of needs and your future growth. You're not building for Series A,
Yeah.
you're building for Series C. So how do you make sure at C you don't like go to the drawing board and build it all again? That itself is a lot of future costs that you have to think about. So you have to you have to get somebody who builds it for scale, right? So the way I built my processes, automated enough, always say like it doesn't matter if you have 10 people running that process or 100 people, this process will not break, and scalable. Like that's what you need to build at an early stage startup. And honestly, like at if some of these later stages companies had that foundation, that would be good. But like what happens is like there's a lot of attrition. People who have built like some of the earlier stuff, imagine layering somebody else on top that built another thing on top and another, and this happens for like 8 to 10 years. You are ending up with like a crazy mix of different ideas that were not scalable, and something breaks that was built by like the second person in this chain. So again, like the first person who's sending, it's a very very critical hire that helps you build for scale and sets the solid foundation. So always look for like that as your top talent thing that you're looking for. And the other one would be like, again, somebody who understands the craziness of startups that come through.
Yeah, yeah, possibly. I mean, I would also recommend someone who's done it themselves, right? I mean,
Yes.
run things at the helm of affairs and being a founder. I think that's always a plus.
100%. I would double down on that. Like me being a founder helped me immensely because I understand selling. I have sold my services. I understand departments that are not directly under my control. Like I've done HR and I've done like, finance. I've done all those things. And this gives you so much of a big picture that now you're being strategic. You're thinking about everything that's moving in a company. And a founder always is like constantly
Yeah.
under stress of like, how each part will work at a company. So just having that thought process, yeah, I think like we hired like a couple of people at Unify that were like ex-founders, and they turned out to be the best hires.
Yeah, I think I echo that statement. This is great, but you put it all out so well. I think RevOps, anybody listening, they get it how powerful this could be, and especially in the age of AI, I understand why this could be a make or break, because the noise is just too much. You need somebody to be able to filter out. But yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Hassan. This has been brilliant. I really appreciate you taking out the time, and this has been a conversation that I really enjoyed. And I think you've explained some of the stuff that I never looked at in this light. So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.